before I start, if I take off my mask, is everyone comfortable with that? I'm sitting kind of, and I'm fully vaccinated. My entire household is vaccinated too. So, okay,
You
thank
can
you.
breathe while you talk.
Yeah, just a little bit easier for some things. Um, so my name is Jennell Lynch. First of all, thank you, Tiffany, for inviting me and thinking about me. Andrea and Janie, it's been phenomenal and organizing, and so thank you so much for having me here today. Um, as I talk about leadership lessons, there's two big things I want to touch on. The overarching topic for today is emotional intelligence. And then we're going to drill down to if you feel like you don't have enough emotional intelligence or you're not sure about it, what is one particular thing we can kind of harness and focus in on? And that's making sure your cup is full. And so those are the kind of two things I'm going to cover in our time here today. And it's interactive, it's engaging. So at any time, if I say something, you're like, wait a minute. I had a question, or I have a thought, chime in. Don't wait until the very end and then you're like, dang it, I had something to ask her or say and I completely forgot. Like, I love it to be interactive. So who am I? Who is Jennell Lynch? I've already mentioned I am the founder of the Executive Doula Agency, and I'm the mother of four. My husband is Jennell Lynch, who's also a native of Charlottesville, Virginia. I'm an executive with 20 plus years of experience across multiple industries, which is sometimes interesting. It's like, how do you move from one industry to the next? So across politics, sports and entertainment, finance, and technology. I have a bachelor's of science degree in mass communications from Norfolk State University in Norfolk, Virginia, and then a master's in organizational management from the Virginia University of Lynchburg, both HBCUs. Um, and so my career is very interesting. I just threw up a couple of places. I'm a kind of one of those long haulers. I stay at places a long time. I started out my career actually with the NFL because I interned there every single year while I was in college at the Super Bowl and during the summer. And so the year I graduated from college, they were literally bringing in and hiring an intern for every single department to be an assistant or an associate. So that's kind of how I wound up there. From that, I went to the U.S. Senate, which was very interesting. I worked for then the former Senator Hillary Rodham Clinton, and she was actually looking for someone in communications that had no political background, which made during my interview, I was like, this makes no sense. I'm not from New York. I have no political background. But what I found out is that talking to reporters, they had nothing on me. They couldn't search me. They couldn't say I said this or that. They only could say you were at a football game and you like, so that has nothing to do with this legislation. So her strategy was like very smart at that time. So spent some time there. That's where I had my first child when I worked in the Senate, and from there I actually worked for a technology company which I didn't have on here. Which was phenomenal. It was a technology company called DefiWire that was owned by a woman. She raised venture capital for it, but her business is buying and selling and starting companies. And this was like the third company she had started and ended up selling. And I learned a lot about finance, venture capital, private equity while I was there. And I literally served in probably every division of the company because she wanted me to grow as a leader. So while I started out as a marketing communications person, I was secretary to the board of directors. I oversaw the sales team. I worked with the CIO. So it was my chance to really see how you lead different departments, even without that experience. So that was a phenomenal time, and which led me to NAIC. Again, I was like, when they called me, I was like, I have no real investment experience. Like, I don't know about private equity. Like, why do you want me? And they were like, that's why. Like, you're a neutral person. No one can argue with you about anything. You're learning and you're leading at the same time. So I spent almost 12 years at the National Association of Investment Companies, really focused on helping women and minority private equity investors raise capital from state pension plans. That was our biggest kind of target because they have the largest pools of money. And then we focused on endowments and some other family offices and some international sovereign wealth funds as well. So learned a lot, really grew my network at NAIC across all industries and really learned about the flow of capital, which interestingly, Executive Doula was actually born out of NAIC. So one of the things, I actually led a women in private equity initiative for about 6 years, really looking at how can we get more women in finance, because as we all know in certain industries there's just not enough of us. how can firms retain more women, importantly, because they start out great, coming out of college, coming out of grad school, all excited. Then they get married, start to have kids, and it's like, I don't know about this industry. My firm is not supporting me. My bosses act like they don't know what to do with me. There wasn't a lot of growth. So really looking at resources and strategies for firms and how they can retain them. But for me, more importantly, is how can we get more women to the top, to the managing director, to the partner level? How can we get more women starting actual funds? Because then they will allocate more capital to more women. And while I was there, one of the things that we kept coming across every event, every board meeting, even conferences when people ask questions, it would all fall back on when women started to have kids and how it was such a huge hurdle in their career in this particular industry. So personally, I actually became a trained doula, which was like so weird. It's like, hey, this woman working in finance and now she's a doula. Like, what is she doing? And I did it almost as like a side hustle so that I can help and coach women through their pregnancy, but at the same time, I'm still helping them with their career. Literally drafting emails for women at 8 months saying, telling their boss they're pregnant. They've been working all this time and no one knew they was pregnant. Literally helping them put the words together and find like the strength to tell, I'm about to leave in like a month because I'm about to have a baby. And I'm talking about executive women, like top executives. So I was like, this is a problem. Like, we will always have the same handful of women that I always counted on at the top if we can't figure out this middle group, if we can't figure out how to help and support them. And essentially, I had some investors come to me and was like, Jennell, we already know what your side hustle is. I was like, oh God. This can go either way right now, you know. And they were like, I think this is good. Like, can you put a business plan together and we'll fund it? And it was essentially the birth of Executive Doula and supporting women in finance. And so it's a business to business. I don't do one-on-one, like if someone called me and say, hey, we need a doula. What I try to do is to get them to encourage their business to purchase packages, to purchase it. Because for me, is if your company buys into this, they really believe in you. They want to retain you. They value you, and they value you as a new mother. So it's a B2B. So just wanted to kind of give you a highlight of what Executive Doula is, my path to it, because it all doesn't make sense if you just look at it like that. It doesn't make sense at all. So before I go to the next slide and we actually jump into the conversation, I want to do a kind of another little icebreaker around emotional intelligence. It's something that I learned a lot about at the beginning of my career because other leaders told me it's something to look out for in other people. I also talk to my children a lot about emotional intelligence when it comes to being in the classroom with their teachers. In order to be able to discern certain situations, if it's worth a reaction, if it's not a reaction, being able to discern if someone is going through something, but their reaction to you is actually not personal, is because they're dealing with something. And what I recognize, and I think I was telling Janine about this earlier, is that during COVID, it has exposed a lot of leaders who do not have emotional intelligence. And so what is that? That is the ability to manage emotions, not just for yourself, but for others around you, for individuals and for teams, and to react in an effective way, not in like a knee-jerk action, way. And so I've had the privilege of working with some phenomenal people who have great emotional intelligence and also some who do not. And I was actually taught to call them on it and to let them know, but in an empathetic way. And so my mother-in-law knows too, I call people on their card. Like, I have no bars in doing that, but I think it's the only way to alert people of those things, and there's a right way. There's a right way to do it. So I wanted to talk about that a little bit and do a quick kind of activity around it. So and I love working with small groups because you can do stuff like this. So I'm going to start a story. And the story is based on a single mother with 2 kids. And I know I was not thinking about you when I started this activity. Somehow it just, so I had it's never based on any one person. I'm going to finish this. I know. So don't take it personal. It's not you. It's not about you. So I'm going to start the story with like 3 sentences, and then we're going to pass it around. You add 2 or 3 more sentences onto the story. And the goal is based on what your input is into the story. It's almost how you feel, react, and you add on to certain situations. Doesn't have to be serious. It can be funny. It can be, you can be creative. But it's just like we're building this story of this character together. And doesn't have to be long, like a couple of sentences and that's it. Okay, so I'm going to get started. I'm going to kick it off. So there was a single mother of two named Tina. I swear I didn't think about you when I was doing this. Who was getting prepared. She's an executive at a consulting firm. Let's just say Gartner. At a consulting firm, getting prepared for a presentation. Very nervous the night before. Her kids also had a lot of activities going on the next day at school. So she woke up disoriented.
Oh. And she made herself a pot of very strong coffee. Did some morning exercises to try to keep herself balanced and got her kids going on their day.
She had to drive them to school that day, and on the way to the school, she spilled coffee on herself because she was feeling flustered.
So after spilling coffee on herself, she went to the nearest gas station where some creeper came up to her and popped her.
She was feeling friendly, so she talked to him for a few minutes and then remembered that she has an extra shirt at the office.
She got back in the car, and from the back seat, her 6-year-old said, "I don't want to go to college, because then I would have to be an executive."
And she explained all the perks of being an executive and how you could be your own boss. And that way you could tell other people what to do.
So at that moment, she realized she was in control of her life. And she regrouped in her head, and the sun started to shine at that moment.
And she enjoyed the sunshine and realized that it was a signal that she was doing everything she could and doing the best she could, and she put a smile on her face and started driving.
And then she realized she needed support from her best friends. So she picked up the phone and called her oldest best friend just to talk about she needs a little more time with her friends and taking care of herself.
And she started to have menstrual cramps.
Real life story right here.
It was like, crap. And then she realized, okay, life is good, I got this, and hey, I'm going to knock this presentation out the park.
And so she proceeded to drive to the nearest food line to purchase some BC powder and a Coca-Cola. Because that's what I do.
Right.
And she killed the presentation.
The end. I love
Poor
it.
lady.
I love it. But the person we put together and we described in that story definitely had a level of emotional intelligence to do what she had to do, get herself together in certain situations, get her kids off, get back to work, and deliver the presentation. Now you can imagine someone who does not have a certain level of emotional intelligence along the way. The coffee spill would have knocked me, oh Lord, I got to go back home like this. It's so many parts within that story where it could have went completely awry. Or that person could have called the office and took it out on someone else. I'm going to need you to blah, 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 and just completely go off and then destroy someone else's morning. She did not do that. She contained it. She figured it out, got to work, and didn't take it out on anyone else. So, thank you.
She even called her best friend.
Yeah, and called her best friend, which I do all the time. I love that. So this was a great story. So just to give you an idea, we just did an entire scope of the difference between someone with emotional intelligence and someone if they didn't have it and how it can go wrong. So what we're going to talk about today, leadership lessons, life lessons. It's all going to kind of blend together, because in what I do at this stage in life that I work with women around being caregivers, sometimes it's hard, and I've found this over the past 5 years. When you compartmentalize being a mother and an executive, you are not helping the next generation, and you're not setting the proper expectations for those others in the office. Like, use that opportunity to talk about being a mother, to talk about you're having to leave to go to a child's doctor's appointment. Like, talk about those things, because when you don't talk about it, then someone comes along and they need to do it. It's like, such and such, Susan has 3 kids and she never had to. You're not helping out the next group of women. Mm-hmm. So I really work with women and talk to them a lot about how to do it professionally, how to do it appropriately, where, it's not disrupting the office. There is a way to do it. And me working with probably my entire career, mostly men, I learned that kind of the hard way, but I never not talked about being a mother. I never not talked about my family issues. I never not talked about it. And I think I learned that from when I had my first child and working with Hillary Clinton. She always said, from the day she found out I was pregnant, was like, your family comes first. How long do you need to take for maternity leave? What are your biggest issues or stressors? That's what's important, because if that's a problem, you can't do your job. Mm-hmm. And that's across, I think that resonates with anyone who's a caregiver of anyone. If your family's not doing good, if home's not well, you can't effectively and productively do your job right. So that's why I threw in like the life lessons under leadership, because it all, when I talk about things, it all kind of goes together. So the first thing we're going to talk about is your cup full. Because if your cup is not full, you also cannot be an emotional, intelligent leader if you're operating from a broken cup. And then how are you filling the cup of others? Great leaders not only focus on themselves first, because you got to be full in order to pour out, but how are you filling those cups of those around you? And how do you do that? And why is that important? That's going to be the second thing. So first, is your cup full or is your cup empty? So I would say when my cup is empty, I am the Joker on the side blowing up the hospital. That's from the movie Batman, if you all ever seen it. It's one of my favorite pictures. Like, I'm losing it, and if I'm losing it, everybody else around me is feeling me losing it, and nothing is going to go well. But when my cup is full, I'm at peace, I'm at a good place, I am reacting to those around me in that way, and it's very loving. And I'm going to talk about this from the standpoint of a day-to-day basis. I think a lot of times when you hear this term, is your cup full, it's kind of a broad stroke, broad sense. Like, are you doing yoga every day? Are you working on this? Like, I literally tackle my life one day at a time. So, because we all get so busy. We're all trying to achieve certain goals. We all have different things happening. So I try to tell people, pare it down, because when you think of things in the totality of life, it's overwhelming. Mm-hmm. Like, I always remember job interviews, they're like, so what do you want to do in the next 5 years? Where do you want to be? Let me tell you where I want to be next month. Let's start with that. Let me tell you how much I want to make and what I want to be doing next month. So I always tell people, don't be overwhelmed by the totality of things. Let's drill it down. So when we're talking about your cup full, let's talk about day to day what fills your cup. And so I'm going to start with me. So a good day for me, and this is different from everybody. So I say when you hear what I'm sharing, digest it, but then you have to think about it on your own terms. What works for you? What makes sense for you? And it's all just to kind of evoke some type of thoughts when I'm sharing. So what makes my cup full? If I wake up before my kids, that's a start. Because then I feel like I'm in control of the morning, and they aren't. When they get up first, it's just like, Mom this, Mom that, yeah. Like, okay. If I can wake up before them and I can get some movement in. So whether that's just a walk, whether it is yoga, if I can get a 20-minute class on the Peloton, like if I can get some kind of movement and me time in before the rest of the house starts, I'm like, yeah, the rest of this day is going to be great no matter what happens. I, on purpose for myself and my team, we do not have any internal meetings before 10 o'clock in the morning. And that's on purpose. And that's intentional, because I want everybody to find time for themselves. I don't care if you can sit down and have a cup of tea for an hour and watch your news or meditate or pray or work out. No one's getting an email and no one's getting a text message before 10 o'clock. The only time that's different is if it's an external potential client type of meeting. But even once we have clients, we let our clients know, like, you won't hear from us before 10 o'clock. Like, we are getting ourselves right before we try to help others. And that's part of filling your own cup before you pour out to other people. The other thing that, if my cup is full that day, I actually eat lunch. I don't know if you all feel like sometimes you are moving so fast throughout your day. Next thing you know, it's 2, 3 o'clock, and you're like, oh my God, okay, do I actually eat lunch now because it's almost dinner time? Do I just find a granola bar? Do I eat some Utz chips because that's normally what I do? Or what do I do? So I say when I've had some movement, when I've gotten up early, done a little work after 10, but then I actually eat lunch between like 12:30 and 1:30. I'm like, the day, no one can mess up my day. I didn't eat lunch at lunchtime. I love it. And what I always try to work into, it doesn't happen daily, but within the week, I make sure I talk to 2 people that's pouring into me. Because as a leader, when you're always giving to others and you're giving your time and you're managing multiple things, it's important for people to then kind of, I say, check you, professionally and personally. So I have, weekly calls with a couple of my good friends who are also entrepreneurs, and we just kind of touch base. I tell them what I got going on, they give me feedback, and then professionally, people who are like goals, I would say, people who've been there, done that. I like to check in with them. I like for other people to feed into me, to give me some additional thoughts and ideas. And I feel so good afterwards because I didn't have to think of this. People are giving me ideas and thoughts and suggestions and things like that. So I love when someone else takes the opportunity to pour into me. So that's just an idea of what fills my cup. And I think I mentioned this in our small group discussion. My win is when my whole house is healthy. Because if anyone knows when one person goes down, it just throws everything off. Because you got to care for the one person, and then they probably going to get somebody else sick. And ultimately, I probably end up getting sick. So a win for me, like during the whole pandemic, has keeping my whole household healthy. Like, oh my God, thank you, Jesus. So that's what fills my cup. So when those things aren't happening, I can tell my cup is getting depleted. I can tell I'm starting to feel the cracks. And when that happens, what do I do? So during COVID, I think for everybody, it was a transition of being at home all the time. And so for me, it was feeding people all day. And really, Executive Doula started in 2019, in the fall of 2019. So I literally had just like birthed this new business. Then we go to a pandemic, and I'm like talking to investors, talking to potential clients with kids in the background. I have a 9-year-old who was standing in front of me in Zooms correcting me, like, that's not how you say that sentence. You're talking too long. It's lunchtime. Like, no matter how much I'm like, shh, go to your room, go to your desk. She's like, we can hear you, you're too loud. Oh my God. Like literally, after about 4 months of that, I text some of my girlfriends like, y'all, I gotta leave my house. This isn't working. And we literally met in Richmond. We all got a hotel with a therapist and literally had a weekend closed in with a therapist. Like, it was the best weekend like ever. That's amazing. And we did it twice after the first one was like, oh, we're doing this again. Let's get this on the calendar. And we needed it. We needed it so bad. And from that experience, it made me think about the other people on my team and what they were going through and how they were probably feeling depleted. So what I did is we incorporated weekly group sessions with therapists. We built some of the best relationships with so it started out with different topics. I remember the first one was recognizing the difference between anxiety and depression and how one leads to the other. And from that, it was such an outpour of questions and thoughts and situations. We were like, okay, we need to do this more often. Like, I recognize everybody needed this. And so we actually partnered with a couple of clinics so that our doulas and our management team have access to therapists 24/7, like all the time. Because we realized, I was like, okay, I thought it was just me that needed this. Everybody needed this. And so that was one of the ways that I replenished my cup in that moment and recognized that it was being depleted and I needed help. So before I go into how are you filling the cup of others, I wanted to open it up really quick and ask anybody, are there ways in which you fill your cup? Are there things that spark joy that you know of that you are missing right now? Like, is there something you typically, like, when I do this, I feel great, and you're not doing it anymore? Anyone want to share? Like,
I think friendship, like friends.
friends.
I've had one of my best friends moved to Texas a couple months ago, Joyce. And then I had another friend move to DC. And I'm very particular about who I share my time with in my space. And so not having that core group of people anymore is really kind of hit me hard. And so now, again, like you said, I'm the person that's everybody's calling and it's like, oh my God, I got this going on. What should I do? Can you? I'm just like, I can't answer my phone anymore. I literally have turned off all notifications on my phone, including text messages. And when I feel like it, I go into my phone and I check my messages.
Right.
And that's helped me mentally, but I still don't have, my group of people. And so I have to find ways, like I, work out now. I've been working out for the last 2 or 3 months, 3 days a week. And then, hot baths and things like that. But it's still like we're created for relationships. And so when we don't have that, I think that actually does hurt us. And I think it's kind of led to the social anxiety that we've seen happening over the last several months.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, one of my struggles, I think, over the last however long it's been, we were saying we couldn't remember when it all started.
It all blends together. The years are blending.
Was just being able to build on these meaningful relationships in the community. And so while Zoom definitely had its own silver lining, I felt like I couldn't build this really impactful relationships with person right next to me, and like trying to build on that. So that is my goal this year, is to physically be more mindful about being with people in the present and like building those relationships.
Yeah.
But I know we were lucky Zoom worked out, but this is so
I think everyone is like kind of over Zoom at this point.
Yes.
It's, Anyone else want to share?
Mine is just people interaction.
Yeah.
I get so much joy and fulfillment out of being constantly on teams, working with people, being around people. So like I worked in patient care for a long time, so that interaction with, as grumpy as people come in the door because they're sick or whatever, it fills my heart. And my current position is a very isolated one. So for the last 2 years I've been at this company, it's just been like draining me and draining me and draining me to the point where I'm like, I hate everything. So that's been hard because, it's just a matter of trying to, for me, mentally get over the fact that, hey, this pays well, but at the same time, it's taking away things that matter in my life. So I'm like trying to figure out how to break that barrier.
Right. Prioritize some more social interactions with people. Yeah. Anyone else?
That's pretty much mine too. My job is actually very isolating, even though like one of my goals is to be with the community, but I don't get to do that every day. And so I actually went out with a girlfriend last weekend and we went to a bar, and I haven't been to a bar in like 5 years, and I made a ton of new friends. And it was just like a random night, but it filled my cup that had been empty for a long time. And just like being able to be like, oh, this is what normalcy feels like. And like, hey, you do kickball? Oh, I should do kickball. You know what I'm saying? So,
Everyone will start to pick up like new sports and activities.
I did actually. I picked up golfing. And I'm thinking a million years I'd like golfing. That's so boring watching on TV. But I'm enjoying it. Really am enjoying it.
Anyone else?
It's nature, being outside. So this time of year, I always every year it's the same thing. I have to remind myself to be more intentional about it because I get so much of it in the summer and the nicer months. So during the work day, just getting outside, and especially nice these past 2 days.
Yeah, so I hear a lot of social interaction, a lot of person-to-person contact. And I think that's had an effect on a lot of kids too. I know I've seen that in the schools. I was speaking at the school this week, and just kids being back together. And I had to tell some teachers, there are going to be moments where it's chaos because they are just excited to be together. Like, don't take it personal. Like, just let them be free for about 20 minutes and get it all out. But they're excited, like, to be with people, to interact, to be outside, like playing again on the playground with everyone. So I think everyone is going through that. So I do that and I ask people to share because I want you to say it out loud and I want you to get it out because I want you to know it's actually a priority. Because sometimes we just keep things to ourselves, we keep it in our head, we're like, oh, we're going to do it. You don't do it. You just keep on trekking along next day to the next day. But in a way, when you say it out loud and you say it to other people, so now when I see you all, I'm like, girl, did you go to dinner with such and such? Or did you talk to your best friend? You going to Texas next month? Like, I can hold people accountable, but it's, and women, a lot of times we don't prioritize things that make us feel well over top of prioritizing things that make other people feel well and do better. So I think we have to just be conscious in saying things out loud. You're kind of aware, like, oh shoot, that did make me unhappy. I do need to do more of this. So it's one of the reasons why I ask people to share like ideas and things like that. Now, how are you filling the cup of others? Now that we talked about how to do it for ourselves, what was missing when the cup is broke. So that's how my cup was looking when I told my girls, like, I got to get out the house. I am over it. This is not working. Nothing. I was angry at my husband for no reason. He was like, why you got attitude? Every time I just be like, hey, Jennell, where? You got attitude. Every answer got attitude. I was like, I am done. I'm over all of y'all. Like, so he was like, yeah, go figure out your life and come back. But the difference is, so it's interesting, he actually went to work every day. So he was still out interacting with people, having conversations. I'm in the house with the kids all day, and he would come back like, what's wrong with y'all? I'm like, dude, you can go back to the dealership. Like, so it's interesting to see the dynamics of people who were in the house or working virtually all the time versus people who actually got out and had interactions. I think you'll notice like a difference in their state of being in mind right now. So how are you filling the cup of others? I am very intentional about that. And I think I've been my entire life, even as a child, when I was, my mother is a social worker. She always cared more about others, I felt like, than she did anything else. Like literally, I would be at school, I'll never forget, I was in middle school, and one of her children, one of her foster care kids, actually, I guess didn't have a winter coat. And the school called her and was like, this kid keeps showing up at the school without a coat. And she sent a message to me in math class, like, take off your coat and take it to the main office. I was like, take off my coat, take it to the main office. And come to find out when I got home, she wanted that child to have a coat when they left the school when she couldn't get another when they were fast enough. And that was my first lesson of intentional giving and sharing. She was like, you'll get a coat. You can go to Walmart, get you another coat tonight. This kid doesn't have those means. Give them the coat. And so I've always been intentional about giving and helping and sharing my time, my resources with other people, personally and professionally. Because I'm a true believer, too, in what you give life, what you give the universe, it gives back to you tenfold, easily. And I found that to be very, very true. And so with my coworkers and my team, even my board of advisors, I make sure I'm not always asking of them. I start off conversations about, what do you need? How can I help? At the beginning of meetings, we kind of set the tone by saying, let's just do a check-in. Like, how's everybody doing? What's going on? Whether it's wins or losses, personal stuff in families, like, let's just do a check-in. How's everyone feeling before we get started? Because what I do know is, sometimes if you don't check in with people and see how they're doing, what you're about to go through on an agenda is irrelevant. They're not digesting it. They're thinking about what they're trying to solve. And many of the times when we do check-ins, it's interesting, someone else is on the call in the meeting is able to help out that person with whatever else they needed or have going on. So I think it's important sometimes to just vocalize, create spaces for people to vocalize their needs and what's going on, their feelings, professionally and personally, so that people can contribute and you can figure out what's needed. One of the things that I mentioned this about the team, being intentional, is once I started, we had that retreat kind of with a therapist, and I was like, ooh, I should try this with everybody. And I saw in the Zoom meeting how everyone was reacting and just like, this is amazing. I'm feeling like this. Does this mean I need to do this? I was like, oh God, everybody needs this. So we intentionally built in counseling and therapy time into weekly meetings and monthly meetings. And so just being intentional about recognizing people's emotions and what they're going through, and trying, even as a small business where I'm still like growing and trying to create like positive revenue, still partnering with organizations and figuring out ways in which I can create resources and support for people. And my partner, so my co-founder is in the top picture. It's so funny. This is actually a meeting. This started out as a team meeting, and this is how we were actually acting. And there was another doula at the meeting who's a photographer, and she started taking pictures and was like, okay, y'all look cute, y'all got on makeup, and y'all are having fun. This would be a good photo shoot. So she started taking pictures, but she was like, this is actually fun. But we intentionally, even if we're talking about hard things, we make sure that it's a light. Life is heavy all by itself. So trying to figure out how to solve things, for us is like we're creating so much from scratch, but who's already invented this wheel? Who can I call? Who can I partner with that we can either create some type of a partnership agreement that we can figure out? They get a pinch of this if we sell this service. Like how can we easily do this? And so a lot of our meetings are laughing. Like we are laughing. We're having a good time. We're thinking through our network. We're discussing our wins for the week, our losses for the week. But it's so funny how this actually turned into a photo shoot. And this is like the light. So I would say in both of those photos, I put those up there because I'm sharing, like I'm pouring into them. I'm giving them advice, and something that may have started out as a hard conversation, we were able to talk through it in a light way. I think for my co-founder, Lindsay, who you can see is pregnant in the top picture, for her it was like, oh my God, I am a co-founder of an organization and I'm about to have a baby. I said, but the good thing is you're about to have a baby for a company that cares about people that have babies. So this will be easy. And it has been. She actually had the baby in August and just returned back from maternity leave, but she's slowly transitioning in with like offline type of tasks and activities and just kind of working her way back in. But I think for her, it was a huge stressor. The other thing is that when people say they're going to disconnect, this is another way I pour into people. Disconnect. Like if you're on vacation or you're sick, if you said last week you're going to email me something, just don't worry about it. You're sick. You're out. Like I'm not going to stress about it. And so I made sure like with her maternity leave, she was just like, well, still include me on the emails. I am not going to BCC you or CC you because you will start reading them and you will start stressing about what is being discussed. And so we included her on nothing until an agreeable time frame in which she can slowly start to transition back in. And so I think small things that are small that sometimes we don't think about are actually meaningful in big ways to fill others' cups and pour into them. Now, let's open it up really quick, like a couple minutes. How do you pour into other people? Or what are some ideas and ways in which you think you can pour into other people? Anyone?
Asking them questions. A lot of times people want to be asked.
Yes.
How they're feeling or what their expectations
Just
are.
simply asking.
Yes. And then listen.
Yeah.
Keep quiet and listen.
That's it.
That means a lot.
You care. When you ask, you actually care enough to ask the question. Yeah, I love that. Anybody else?
Yeah, Janelle, I was going to share that I think what I've intentionally tried to start doing is when someone comes to my mind, just text or call them. Because, I'm just famous for putting it off and putting it off, and then you learn something, I was going to call you, and so when someone comes to mind, just a quick text or a quick call, and what I've started doing was like how are you really
right.
Yeah, just to I don't want to give get the trite response, but I want folks to know, look, I really genuinely care how you do.
Right, I'm thinking about you.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. There's probably about 2 or 3 people I know in my life who I'll get a random text from like, just checking in on you, like, how you doing? I was thinking about you the other day. And I'm like, oh, I ain't heard from you in like 8 months. But oh man. And it just made me pause and like, that's a good person. But it's so like, I like that because so many times you may think of somebody, but you're so busy in the moment of what you're doing, you just keep on going. But just those simple text messages that I get from people, I'm like, oh my God, that was so nice. Oh. Anybody else?
Listening and asking questions and trying to be intentional about asking questions, like things that people have told me, like someone's like, oh, I had 6 kids, I don't know, that just came to mind.
Yeah.
And being like, oh, how are your 6 kids? But like trying to remember
Remember
those
those
small
little-
things,
yeah.
those little details that people tell you, and you know, so like, oh my gosh, you remember that? I'm like, yes, of course. So I mean, it's hard, but I try and like put those things in the back of my mind to make sure to
That's a
ask
good one,
how people
yeah.
are doing.
It's important, yeah. Anybody else?
I'm such a gifter. I love gifts. But if someone is having a bad day, I actually try to partner with some of my new business colleagues who just started a florist and like dropping little flowers off. Just like surprising them and trying not to like interrupt their day. Either leave it on the front porch and give them a little wave on their cameras that
On their ring like it was me.
but I do that a lot. And it really is just, it's fun.
Yeah.
And it makes, you know, someone's day happier.
And you just never know
Yeah.
how people's day is going. And a lot of times you're fine when you say that little thing that they didn't think you know, or you just touch base or you drop off and they're like, whoa, because I was having a day. I needed this. Like it turned the whole thought around. So I would say, you know, when we leave here and just continue to be intentional about not only filling our cup and doing things that bring us joy, but also how are we filling the cups of those around us, and in small ways. I always say, like I said again at the beginning, when you think of things that are too big, too grand, it's like, oh my God, like that's just so much. But it's the little things that are doable, that are intentional, that are no cost sometimes. You know, like just keep those things in mind, keep those people in mind, your team members, those who work around you, and that leads back to being a leader with emotional intelligence. And I find that what we just talked about, leaders who don't have that, they have a hard time retaining people because they lack the grace, the empathy, the caring to ask the questions, to remember the details. They just slide over it really quick. And so I am like spot on time. And so when my cup is completely full, that is me. And this was another like quick girls trip to the National Harbor, another Saturday, Sunday where it was a group of us like, we need to go. Well, don't nobody have no money. We're like, let's all get a room together. We can all make it work. We just need a pool and a bar. And that's what we did. We stayed at a property with a pool and a bar for a weekend, and it was just great. So thank you again for having me. I think Andrea, Tiffany, Janie all have my contact information. I think I have a couple of business cards too if anybody wants. But feel free to reach out anytime if I can ever be a resource of help with anything you're working on.
Thank you.
You're welcome.